So I'm going to be talking about 3 years in value stream management and what I've learned in 36 months at the VSMC. We are a reasonably large audience. I'm just going to say, though, that I'm very happy to take questions. So I've got the chat up here. I'm happy to have a voice-to-voice chat if you want to do that as well, because we've got a lovely Zoom platform that Milan's put in place for us. So we can have this as me not necessarily just talking at you for 40 minutes or so, but us actually having a bit of a chat if you would like to do that as well. So, as I said, my name is Helen Beal. I have what I believe is known as a portfolio career, in that I have a number of permanent but part-time jobs. So I am, amongst other things, the CEO of the Value Stream Management Consortium, and really that's the main role that we're going to be talking about today. I do have a few other hats, particularly around DevOps, which was really my path into value stream management, which is, if we have time, we may talk a little bit more about later on. And increasingly, of course, AI, which we are definitely going to talk about a bit more later on as well. Of course, I'm sure it will come up in every talk today. So first things first, I'd like us all to wish a happy birthday to the Value Stream Management Consortium, which celebrated its third birthday on Sunday, just gone. So quite a momentous achievement, I think, to get up 3 years under our belt. And I think it's worth maybe saying a few things about the consortium and why it exists and what our goals are. So the VSMC, as we like to call it for short, is a not-for-profit. It's billed as a trade consortium, 501c, registered in Denver in Colorado. And our goal really is to nurture what we see as a nascent or emerging market around value stream management. And a few of you in the audience may be thinking, well, value stream management, Helen, has been around a lot longer than 3 years. And I agree with you. And in fact, if you take a look at our value stream management foundation course materials, there is a slide in there about the history of value stream management. And actually, we trace it back perhaps as far as the 1400s to the Venetian arsenal, where they started drawing or visualizing and drawing out diagrams to map information and materials flow, which of course was a huge practice later for Ford and then massive for Toyota in the 1950s. So these concepts have been around for a long time, and value stream mapping itself emerged during that 1950s time as well. We historically really point our finger at James Martin and his book, The Great Transition, published in the 1990s, as the start of value stream management as a different thing to value stream mapping. We'll probably come back to that conceptually later. But the Value Stream Management Consortium, then, why has it taken so long for it to exist if value stream management has been around for such a long time? Well, there are a few things that change. There is what I like to term a renaissance around value stream management. And there are some key drivers that have contributed to that. One of them is the emergence and now mainstream activities of what we call DevOps, that movement that was about bringing the agility of software development to the IT operations teams and making those cultural connections that then spilled out into the business. But there were some ceilings that we have been hitting with DevOps, very nicely explained actually in the 2021 State of DevOps report from Puppet. This inability or difficulty of teams getting up, the stagnant middle capability layer around DevOps. So there's that. And then we had analysts, notably Forrester in 2018, publishing papers. So initially a Forrester Wave about value stream management as a new concept or a slightly different concept. And what was different about it relates again to this DevOps movement, in that what DevOps started doing 15 years ago was in a big part automation. And of course, culture is huge with DevOps as well. But a big part of DevOps has been the ability to create DevOps toolchains. And DevOps toolchains have allowed us to collect data across what are effectively our digital value streams. So this renaissance that I talk about with value stream management, that means it is kind of 3 years old, 5 years old in its newest form is really its digital form. So the capability that we have of applying it to our digital world. So today, what I really want to focus in on is the work we've been doing at the consortium around our state of reports. So our state of value stream management, our state of VSM reports. So we now have 3. The third was published in October last year. So it's been around a few months now. I'm just going to put a link in the chat where you can go and you can download all 3 of those reports. They're all free to the world there. What I'm going to talk about today is how these reports have changed over the last 3 years and what we've learned as we have been working to try and create a space for people that are interested in value stream management, people that passionately believe, like we do, that it has the ability to change the world, that to deliver on some of the promises that perhaps things like DevOps have made but haven't fully managed to follow through. And being a researcher and being a leader researcher on these 3 reports over 3 years has been, of course, a very interesting journey, as it always is when you're researching a market and its movement over multiple years. Because what happens is in year 1, you go in with some hypotheses about where the market's at and how certain mechanisms work in the practices and the principles of working and what the outputs and the outcomes of those activities will be. And you get an initial picture. And in year 2, you have a small amount of data that might give you some glimpses. It might give you some sort of buds of growth or buds of idea that your hypotheses are valid and the data is showing you what you believe to be true. But it's really as we move into year 3 that we get really deep data that's starting to really show us that our hypotheses are valid, that the things we thought might be true are, or they might not be. Now, not everything's perfect, as you'll see as we go through the data, but what you're generally looking for, of course, is the trends that are telling us about adoption, that are telling us about the impact of these principles and practices as well. So I've picked out the main bits of the report from this year, from the 2023 report, that talk about what's happened over those 3 years. So this is about the 3-year trends in line with the title for this talk. The report would take us quite a lot longer than the time we have available today to go through in detail, but I do hope you get a chance to read them yourselves. Obviously focus on the latest one if you have to only pick one. But let's have a look at these trends. I'm going to talk a small amount about the other part of the report, which is really important, which is basically the correlations between organisational performance and the utilisation of value stream practices. But let's start by talking about this one. So this one here, as you can see, is asking the survey respondents about which type of work items they create value hypotheses for. Now, some of you might... Everybody's view of what a way of working definition is different. So some of you might have a view of what value stream management is that is different, and you might be thinking, but value stream management doesn't include value hypotheses. But we believe it firmly does. We believe value stream management is really important as a concept in this world that I just described, this digital world, which has reached a level of evolution where DevOps has kind of stuttered. Because one of the problems with DevOps, and this is explained in this report in detail, we did some micro research around people's definitions of the DevOps toolchain. And one of the problems with DevOps is that people often think that it starts with development. So, for example, if we look to things like the DORA metrics, the DevOps Research and Assessment Group that was subsequently bought by GCP, the Google Cloud Platform, people, and continues to run there, there is a metric that they use for lead time, and their definition of lead time differs from, for example, more traditional lean practitioners' definition of lead time, in that they start counting, or they start the clock at code commit. Now, this is problematic because of the fuzzy front ends that I'm sure lots of you are familiar with as well. And one of the things we love about value stream management, if we've come from a DevOps world in particular, where we feel that that's a limitation, is that value stream management starts with the idea from the customer. So it starts with the concept. It starts in the portfolio management area or in the product backlog. It doesn't start at development, but much earlier, and this is recognised. And in fact, this idea of when we create a value hypothesis is really important. And what we're trying to do here is break down different work types. And as a consultant, I know that I've visited a lot of different clients over the years, and this is an area of variability across different organisations. So some organisations' definition of an epic is different from another organisation's. Some people, a feature is a bigger thing for them than in another organisation. So we know it varies, but broadly speaking, we know that there is an element of granularity in these type of work items. So it's interesting for us to know when and where people might be thinking about what the value output or value outcome of the work that they're about to do is going to be. So this is what we're really asking here is, are you thinking about what the customer impact of your work will be? Now, for me, I would probably ask you to cast your eye to the right of this graph where it says we don't create value hypotheses. And the green bar is the most recent year, 2023's data. And what you're seeing here is a big drop in people reporting that they don't do this. This is a really positive sign for us because this is telling us that people are thinking about their work and that their work has to create value, and they're actually planning for that. The spread of the other four columns is a bit more interesting, and we have quite a few debates about this within the Value Stream Management Consortium team and huddles and community about whether there are more important work items or whether you should have a value hypothesis cascading throughout the work items. For me, I do have an opinion on this. It probably won't surprise you. My opinion is that actually at the user story level, we should be defining that value hypothesis. For me, that is the smallest piece. And the reason I think this is important is because once we have estimated or planned for the value that we hope that we're going to create, we want to be able to measure it. And by measuring it, we're going to learn something from it, and that will help us to decide what to do next. And if we're doing things in batches, so the bigger work items that are typically rolling up these smaller items, it becomes more difficult to differentiate the results, to find that actual measurement of what the impact of what we did was. So just going to have a look at the chat so I can see some things popping up here. Perfect. Nice to see you, Richard, as well. And thanks for sharing that template. There is actually also some templates. I think they might be based on Richard's, actually, if I remember correctly, in the Value Stream Management Foundation course that you can get as a member from the Value Stream Management Consortium. At the end of my presentation today, I will be providing people that are not currently members. There is a voucher code that I've got for you to get membership. So in summary, on this side, what we're saying is that over the last 3 years, what we've seen is people are more likely now to be creating value hypotheses and potentially not so much in the smallest of the granularities, actually that's shrinking marginally, not a huge amount of data there. But the most important thing is that people are thinking about the customer experience impact of the work that they're doing. So that's at a working practice level. Let's talk about something at an organisational level now. So this is about people responding to the question about whether they align to a specifically identified and explicitly named value stream. And those words are important. So we're not just generally asking, are you part of a value stream? People going, yeah, you know, I think I kind of am. My team, I guess, is a value stream. What we're actually asking here is whether people are using the terminology value stream to describe these teams or these constructs within their organisational design. And what you're seeing here is a 10% increase from the first year, 2021 to 2023, which is a significant data increase over that time period. So this is exciting for us because this is telling us that people are actively organising and observing and seeing value streams in their organisation. One thing we started asking in 2023 that is becoming an increasingly strong theme of our work is actually about the value stream network. So when I say a value stream network, what I mean is an understanding that we have multiple value streams, but usually within a single organization, but we can talk about cross-organization ecosystems as well. But we're talking about these value streams and the fact that they interconnect. It is very unusual to have value streams with no dependencies on other value streams. And it's something that we've been dealing with in DevOps for a long time in all of our work, whether it's lean or agile or whatever it is, we all talk about dependencies. We all know that they can cause problems, they can cause delays, they can cause risks, and they are the bane of our lives, but also the very reason of our existence often, because they're the way that we collaborate and the way that systems cross each other and the way that customer journeys work and the way that we travel through systems. So they are a fact of life as well as sometimes the bane of our lives. But the value stream network is becoming increasingly important. And as people start to understand that their organisation is always made up of value streams, whether you see them or not, and whether you've named them or not, they are there. The value stream network capability or concepts will become increasingly important. So we've learned that organisationally, people are starting to think increasingly about value streams. I promised to include this other kind of data part of the 2023 report. Really, there were two messages in the 2023 report. One was that value stream management adoption is increasing, and I've showed you two data points so far that tell us that evidence for that assertion. And then the other assertion made in the 2023 report is that value stream management practices align to higher levels of organizational performance. So here's one example. There are actually many more in the report, but because what we're doing today, we're focusing in on the three-year trends rather than the organisation performance trend. But I thought I would just share one with you and you can have a look at the report and see the others for yourselves. So there's two bits of data really sitting here. One is we're asking people to self-assess how their organisation is performing, which is basically a fairly industry standard question about how people are hitting their goals along various different lenses. It's explained in the report in more detail how this question works. And that allows us to classify our data into these different groups of elite, high, medium, and low performers. And then the other question is, of course, the one we just covered, which is about this explicit naming, whether this value stream construct is something that is labelled in an organisation and used on a day-to-day basis. And what you're seeing here is that there is a correlation between people that are using that terminology and organising around value streams and performance. As I said at the start, this data is never perfect, but what you need to focus in on is things like the low performers do not do this, and the high performers very much do this, and the elite and the medium are similar. And we can discuss the elite and the high and why that elite isn't the highest, why the data isn't showing the highest for elite here in quite some detail. And we think it's to do with a lot of the elite performers being kind of born on the web and born kind of doing this, and the high performers are the ones that are actually investing more effort in going that direction.
Hey,
At the
Ellen,
bottom, yes.
sorry to interrupt, but there are a couple of questions around what performance or performers from elite to low. How do you define those? Could you just maybe elaborate on how the performance?
Sure, I actually did, but I will recap. So that data is collected from a question which asks the respondent to self-identify how their organisation is performing. So they're asked to pick what percentage of the time they're hitting their business goals, and those business goals could be financial or they could be to do with the amount of customers they're getting, different sorts of goals and targets. It's a pretty industry standard question. If you have a look at Accelerate, there's a whole section on these sort of questions and how you ask them, but it's effectively a Likert scale. It says like, yeah, we do this. We're 80% of the time we perform that way.
It's a subjective response, right? It's not based on necessarily them presenting data. It's just what they feel like or think.
But yeah, so we can't, we don't have the capability to be able to check their financial performance against their annual report and forecasted goals or their share performance. So yes, it's at industry standard in that they respond to that question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So I can see another question here as well. I think that's answered Andrew's and Dirk's. Vicky has asked, how do you help the respondents determine what a value stream is and how to identify when they are a value stream? Do you provide specific definitions? So yes, in the surveys, we do have little pop-up help things that do describe what a value stream is. There is, this is actually every year that we build the survey, this is a debate that we have in the team. If someone doesn't know what a value stream is, then they're not in an explicitly named value stream, because if they were in an explicitly named value stream, they would know what a value stream is. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. But sometimes there's almost no point defining something in the answer, because if they don't know, then they're not. But yes, we do have little help buttons in there as well. So one of the things that we were doing this year as well, and we are at a value stream management conference right now, part of Milan's Agile and Agility sort of area, if you like. And I've mentioned Lean already, and I've mentioned DevOps, and we could talk about ITSM and IT for IT and SAFe and all sorts of different combinations of ways of working that are all interlinked. And some are better known than others, and each of us has our unique fingerprint of history, where we've come from and where we practice. But our language is interesting. So I'm sure many of you here are probably consultants or practitioners in enterprises, and you know that vocabulary is important, but that sometimes you might be accused of using buzzwords, particularly when we are having conversations between technology teams and what are often known as business teams, which can often mean teams that are not technology, and the fact that we have different languages sometimes. And conversations we have at the VSMC often revolve around whether there is a common parlance or a common understanding around the VSM taxonomy, whether there is a glossary, a dictionary that is known. And the general consensus is there's not. It's emerging, like the practices and the principles are currently in adoption and not yet mainstream. And in fact, it's the piece that we're working on right now, is to produce a taxonomy alongside some AI we've got that is rolling up our content and making it available, that will be launching soon, that I will come back to again probably later. And the point is that I'm trying to make is, in the survey, one of the things we experimented in 2023 with was actually taking some of the language out. So this actually does relate a little bit to the question, I think, from Vicky that we just talked about, which is defining these things. So when we ask a question like, are you part of a value stream, an explicitly named value stream, actually defining a value stream may be counterintuitive, because then it leads us back to that place where people go, yeah, I kind of am, I get what a value stream is. Whereas what we're really asking is, do people use the term value stream in the organisation? But in some ways, we wanted to know about whether people were looking at the flow, so whether they were understanding how to get data on a value stream without using the word value stream. And this is where we were asking questions like this, which is about whether people are primarily viewing data about time to value in a single tool, so TTV. And what you can see here is a massive increase, actually a 20% increase over the 2 years, and a nice steady growth over the years of how people are doing this. So I'm going to go in a bit more detail so I can see something in the chat that I want to check. Yeah, there we go. So this is how we kind of break this down. The single tool is important because this makes it easy for people to see the outcome of their value stream. If people are having to gather data and information from lots of different places, they're spending so much time and effort trying to make sense of what they've got that they don't really get to the point of looking at those delays and waste and making improvements. So breaking this down in a little bit more, this is where we ask where people primarily view the data about time to value. And what's really interesting here is if we look at this one here, which is about the aggregation in a dashboard from multiple sources, this is where we were a few years ago, and you can see this. So this is where people were using dashboards to gather data and view it in a single pane of glass, which sounds good. So it's things like, many of you probably have or maybe still use things like Capital One's Hygieia. So it's things like that. But what you're really not doing there is you're not connecting the data from each of the tools. You're just viewing them through a single pane of glass. So you're not seeing the relationship between them within the value stream. Whereas in a single tool, what you're starting to do is understand how your work is flowing through the whole system. So the drop here in the aggregation in a dashboard from multiple sources is important. And equally, this increase of over 10% here of people seeing their data through a single tool, whether they've bought it, whether it's open source, or whether they've built it, is equally important. Just a single tool, as we were asking about, was the key thing. That single tool we can refer to as a VSMP, or a value stream management platform. So there were debates from Gartner in particular about different types of tools, but if we just say there's one tool for the sake of argument, and it's the value stream management platform tool that allows you to see across your value stream by interconnecting these tools, what we're seeing here is a significant increase as well in people that are using those tools, that are actively piloting and implementing those tools in their system. So we'll circle back to this, but this is that differentiation. Again, I talked about right at the start. Remember I said, yes, the Value Stream Management Consortium is 3 years old. Well done us. Value Stream Management is a lot older than that, but the renaissance for Value Stream Management started much more recently because of the emergence of the DevOps toolchain in particular, and the ability to surface this data, which can now be seen and analysed via a VSMP. So let's talk then, that's a bit of technology and a bit of automation. Let's just skip back now to the practice or the process again. So rather than people, which we covered the people, whether people are aligned to a value stream, for example, from an organisation perspective, let's talk about one of the practices, and this is the measurement practice. So as I said quite a few times, we have hypotheses when we build these things. And our hypotheses are not always maybe what people might think they are. And actually, we don't always agree on them internally. And this is a good example. So this one, when do you measure the value realised by your work? For me, my hypothesis here, or my future view, is what I would like most people to be doing is answering continually. It's instrumented into the product or platform. So I won't surprise you, because I come from a DevOps background, and of course in DevOps we're all about continuous everything. So we want the ability to have real-time data. We want to be able to continually check where we are. But interestingly, what we're seeing here is an increase on that one, so my favoured one, continually, an increase in repeatedly over time, a very small, statistically kind of irrelevant one on the end of the experiment, a shrinkage at the end of the sprint, a significant shrinkage after a push to live, and a kind of no real movement at the end of the project. So what I'd like you to think about here is what we're trying to do when we measure value, and what value really is, and what a value stream is about. So a value stream is about the customer. So value is defined in the eyes of the customer, and it's measured by customer experience. So if all of that is true, then after a push to live makes very little sense, because all we're doing really there is saying we've successfully pushed it to live. We're not really able yet, because the customers haven't really been able to use it in anger, tell what the real value of that is through the eyes of the customer. Similarly with the end of the project, similarly with the end of the experiment, unless our experiment has been written according to our hypothesis that says after a certain date we expect to see this usage pattern. But the repeatedly over time and the continually it's instrumented into product platform, they are telling us that we are trying to understand repeatedly whether our work is having the intended impact. So this one is another organisational one. So this is about who the team reports to about value in the product. This is another one where we have a lot of debate about which the right answer is, and which we think is the most appropriate answer that tells us about why value stream management is important in an organisation having an impact. So for me, my perfect answer here is actually we don't. This decision is for our own decision making. Again, my DevOps background kind of is showing itself here, because the reason I want that answer is because it shows that teams have autonomy. I know in my heart of hearts that my eternal optimism isn't best suited for the job that I do sometimes, because having that answer, that autonomy in the team, would mean that we also have to have ultimate autonomy within an organisation, and by which I mean loosely coupled systems, which requires a loosely coupled organisation. And most organisations don't have that. As I said earlier, dependencies are a fact of life. They may often feel like the banes of our life, but they are a fact of life. And while DevOps tells us to break dependencies, not manage them, the practical application of that philosophy on a day-to-day basis is a long old road, a long hard road to run. So fact of the life is dependencies are a thing, and we often have to live with them. So what is interesting about this slide over 3 years, or this data over 3 years? Well, let's have a look at where the patterns are. So we're seeing a fairly decent increase over the business stakeholders area as the reporting area. We've got a new one that we introduced about who the team reports to in 2023, which is the customer, which now has taken 8% of the answer. So whilst it's quite difficult from a research analysis point of view to suddenly introduce a new answer into a data set that's running year from year, sometimes, as you can see, it's really worth doing. Big decrease this year on last year, although there was only 4% in the year before on the nobody answer. So people are generally reporting about the value in their product. So that is interesting in itself. Interestingly, a fairly significant decrease over the product manager or product owner. And I think that's probably because it's gone to the customer. So this data, I think, there are patterns there, and it is an interesting question, and it will tell us, I think, more as we go on with value stream management over the coming years about how this develops and how people view on value and report on it. And we may start seeing things like value management officers. We may see chief value officers as well coming along, and they may also start playing a part in here. This one looks quite complicated. There are a lot of data points in it. Basically, what we're asking here is about value and the metrics that measure it. So at the Value Stream Management Consortium, we talk about a duality in VSM, and that duality is flow and value realization. So flow is one side of the coin, and that is about our speed of delivery and our time to value. Hugely important to know that we can get the things our customers want to them in a timely manner. But time to market and time to value are two different things. So we need to know that what we're producing is good, and it's what the customer's asking for, that we're doing the right things right and fast. So value realization is about that other side of the coin. It's about customer experience. It's about the outcome, where flow is about the output. So over the years, we are asking questions about these different metrics, and people really struggle with understanding how to measure value. And it does differ from organisation to organisation. Flow is relatively standard from team to team, whereas value can be very different depending on what products are doing. But we are learning, particularly in the digital value stream, that there are ways in which we can measure that customer experience or that value realization, which may seem different to what we've done before. And the main reason in which I'm going to say they're different is if you look at revenue and sales, everything's in alphabetical order on the bottom of this graph here, and then profit margin, what you're seeing is a decrease in both of those ones, which are, unsurprisingly perhaps, my least favourite answers for the question about whether these are value metrics. And the reason I say they're not value metrics is because for me, they're not customer metrics, they're business metrics, and they're therefore lagging metrics. So they're not telling me about the customer experience in real time. They're telling me about what happened later, whether a customer was happy or unhappy. What we're interested in when we do value realization in VSM is learning about the customer experience right now, right as they're using the thing that we've just given them, or we gave them a few days ago, a few weeks ago, and we're tracking to see how that works. So this is where our other metrics, particularly our digital metrics around basket size, bounce rate, conversion rates, customer journey time, and usage, become much more important. You'll see, again, we changed some of the answers here. So we added things like active users and feature usage and retention rates and stickiness and user acquisition. So it is hard for us as researchers. We make life hard for ourselves when we change the answers in a question, but sometimes we have to, because the market's moving, our understanding is moving, and things are changing. But the good news overall here from a 3-year perspective is we are seeing that movement where people are understanding there is a difference in value metrics. There is a difference between flow and a difference between value realization. And within value realization, there is a difference between a customer experience metric and a business metric. And people are starting to put their customer experience metrics higher in importance than their business metrics. So this is all good news, because if we please the customer, we will attract more of them. I didn't mention NPS. I stopped before I got to NPS, because NPS and referrals and reviews are also quite interesting. They've actually also dropped. NPS is quite a difficult one. Again, it's quite a lagging metric. It requires us to review people quite a long time after the event often, whereas referrals and reviews can give us a bit more data. But the data's all a little bit skewed this year because of the new answers we've given that attracted such a lot of the responses. So this is one to watch over the next 2 to 3 years as we move forward. So we introduced in the 2021 report, we introduced the first version of our VSM implementation roadmap, and we didn't actually ask any questions on it. And what we are, sorry, just quickly checking the chat here. I think Richard is on it. Thank you, Richard. Yes, they were able to choose multiple metrics. And yes, I prefer leading metrics that are customer experience oriented rather than business oriented. Oh, thank you, Patrice. That's wonderful as well. So let me just pop back for a sec, because Jim's just asked for another clarification here. So the point I was making here about leading and lagging is, if we look at profit margin and revenue, which have typically been some of the most reported metrics in the past, is those are lagging metrics when it comes to value. They can only tell us what's happened in the past for customer experience. The customers liked stuff and they haven't liked stuff, and they've kept on buying things and recommended the product to other people. Then the leading metrics are the things about how much people are using, what the bounce rate is, what the journey time looks like. Those are the things that are going to tell us what's happening in the near term rather than the long term. The other point about is that the revenue and sales and profit margin are not customer experience metrics, they're business metrics. Again, I'm just going to reference the Value Stream Management Foundation course, which has a whole section on value stream metrics. So if you're not a member already, please consider becoming a member of the Value Stream Management Foundation course as part of your membership. Steve Pereira and I recorded a self-paced version. It takes about 8-10 hours to get through all the materials, but there's a lot in there. It's all good. And actually, we've got some smaller courses, some micro-learning that we'll be releasing soon as well. But you could just skip to the metrics section if you wanted to, which is one of the 8 modules within that course, for a bit more detail on this as well. So thank you, Patrice, for putting the link in the chat for the Value Stream Management Consortium VSM Implementation Roadmap. As I said, we introduced this in 2021. It's been through a couple of revisions and had a new revision this year. We didn't start asking this question until 2022, so we only have 2 years data on this one, not 3. But what you need to know about this in a kind of a summary or a snapshot is that ultimately, where we want to see this graph is flat. So all these bars equal. What that would mean, apart from none, actually, which would be none, and everything else would be equal. And what that would tell us is that everybody has completed every step in the VSM implementation roadmap. What we're seeing here over 2 years is an increase here in the connect steps. So what you're seeing broadly is a bit of a dip as we go through. So people are doing, unsurprisingly, the first steps in the roadmap and less of the latter steps. We're seeing a little bit of a peak here around map, which again isn't surprising. I alluded to this, albeit at the start, I'll be a bit more explicit about it now. Value stream mapping is a very well-established practice across many industries, newer perhaps to the digital and software development industries, but nonetheless, it's better known and often people's entry point into value stream management. And just to give that some more context, this is the value stream management implementation roadmap. There is mapping as a step that you would take as you implement value stream management within your team or within your organization. So these are the steps that we're asking people whether they have completed. And you can see people are doing vision more. And in fact, what you're not seeing on there is assess, which is a new step that we've added this year. We have an assessment survey tool that you can reach on our website. Maybe Patrice could add a quick link to that if he doesn't mind. And we'll be adding that data in the future. So these are the steps that you follow, and then you do a continuous inspect and adapt. So if you remember back there, I was talking about the ability to have a tool that is instrumented so that you're able to continually inspect your data in your value stream. This connects to this area. And then this connect piece here, this is the thing that makes value stream management different today from what it was in the 1990s, in that we have this digital capability that has emerged, particularly from the work we've done in DevOps with DevOps toolchains, that allows us to view our digital value streams digitally. So where are we at then with the state of VSM? Well, I wanted to say a couple of things about AI. I've mentioned it because we do have something we're going to be releasing quite soon, which I'm really excited about, which is called Flow Buddy. A Flow Buddy is a chat AI. It's a generative AI chatbot that we've built. Heidi Araya has built it. She's speaking later. We'll be releasing it soon. Flow Buddy is trained with all of our materials. It's sponsored by one of our members, Entity Data. And you'll be seeing it soon. So I'm super excited about AI. I've been working in AI for quite some time now. I mentioned that I have a portfolio career. One of the other areas that I've been working in is AI Ops for Moogsoft for several years. I've been writing and researching, writing the state of availability reports with them. So I am a big lover of this, but I haven't been so keen on it in recent months, mainly because I feel like it's distracted from some of the work that we've been trying to do in VSM. So I wanted to talk about this hype cycle. Obviously, it's generative AI that's really created the storm, I think, that's happened in recent months, and it's here at the top here. So what we're saying is that it's at the top, it's at the peak of inflated expectations last year. We've seen that it is going to plateau in 5 to 10 years. So with that, I had a chat earlier on with a colleague, Stephen Waters, writer of the Value Stream Management Reference Architecture, along with Craig Statham, and we were talking about this because he's not the first person, but we were talking again about how in recent months a lot of enterprises in particular have been asked by senior executives to do something with AI. It's become a bit of a tick box, an exercise in showing people that things are happening with it. And it's been good because the hype is starting to uncover some of the limitations. So examples would be junior developers are using AI to create code, but they don't really understand the code. So they're not learning so much. And then senior developers are having more weight put on them because they're having to unpick problems with the code. We've got AI code that is introducing vulnerabilities at a greater rate. But there is a problem in the value stream because the security team aren't set up to deal with the vulnerabilities at the same rate that the developer AI code is producing them. So that's from a developer AI perspective. So I think what we're going to see in 2024 And we will be asking some questions in our survey, which will launch in April this year. We will be asking questions about people's application of AI to their value stream. I think we will see more convergence between these two technologies, and hopefully we'll see what I feel like has been a little bit of a stutter in VSM adoption come back around as people start getting to know the AI limitations a little bit better. The hype dies down a little bit, and people realise that they need to do things like actually connect their value stream before they can apply AI to it. So I'd love to hear more thoughts from you guys about where you think we're at with that as well. But I have run out of time today, so just one last thing really, which is, if you're not yet a member, we would love you to join us. Just to remind you, we are a not-for-profit. We are funded by our members for the work that we do. So everything like that research, for example, is funded by our members. To get $50 off the annual individual membership to the consortium, there's a code there for you to use. But I've very much enjoyed my time with you today. Thanks for all the chat. Thanks so much to Richard and Patrice and everyone in the audience. And I will stop there.